Welcome to The People I Know, a philosophical podcast with and about the diverse people I have met over the years as an African American thinker, dancer, and other whatnot. Today's guest is Miss Isobel Devi, a Denver, Colorado-based dominatrix, a fetish model, and a self-proclaimed boot hoarder. I hope you enjoy.
Easy. Hello, I'm Miss Isobel Devi, but Miss Isabel's fine for friends and kind people in my life. I am a professional female dominant. I have been in the entertainment industry for most of my adult life, and also in the adult industry for most of my adult life. I actually worked at a adult store. That was one of my first kind of like sexy jobs that I had, and just everything in my life kind of always ran down that like sexy job line. Like I love the adult industry. I think it's a great place full of great people, and I've been in it for about 10 years now, and I'm happy here. I also do performing arts more as a hobby than anything else. That's how we met. I've met
Yes.
so many good people through that, and also some that weren't as good, but we don't talk about those guys. um, and yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I like to dance and I like to be bossy, and um, I like to make friends like you. So
Ah.
if anyone ever has any questions for me regarding any of the things that I do, I'm usually pretty open to answering them. I'm Miss Isobel Devi on most platforms, so like just at Miss Isobel Devi, and if you find me on there and you could be friendly and say hello, I won't be too angry unless you're a mooch.
Yeah, and I'll absolutely put your
But
information.
I
It's
do love my community, so if anyone ever like needs advice or a friend, I'm here.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's I did add a few questions on my list for today because I realized I'm like, oh goodness, some people are going to be really wondering just kind of the basics, and you've already covered one thing as far as like how did this come into how did your life blossom in this kind of way?
Yeah.
And yeah, so you and I met because of go-go dancing, and you were my boss. And yeah, dealing with nice and not so nice people in the wee hours of the morning while dressed in cute clothes.
And the
Yeah.
challenges.
Oh, the challenges. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about it. There weren't that many like bad nights. I just feel like the few nights that were bad were just so dramatic, like made up for.
Right, right. No, they weren't overwhelmingly bad nights. It's just the ones that were bad were like catastrophically bad. Where
Yeah.
you're just like, how did I end up here? What
How
am
did
I
I
doing
end
with
up here?
myself? Like, I
Yeah.
must have like upset some like deity somewhere because
Right.
punishment.
Yeah. Next question to kind of get out of the way is I've always been familiar with somewhat familiar with your background, but you are part of this season as the mixed chicks I know because you are some kind of mixed. And so, what kind of mixed are you, and why does it matter, and why doesn't it matter? No, when I think of you, I think like you did not start out in the United States, or you have
No,
some and you ended up here some kind of way.
I can give you a quick rundown because I don't want it to get very long and drawn out because it can very easily become that way. But I was
Okay.
born in Bulgaria. When I was about 4 years old, my parents had this overwhelming dream, like most other, smaller country people, to move to the United States and have the American dream. So they thought that maybe if they snuck into Germany, they could more easily sneak into the United States. But that was illegal, and they figured out that it was very dangerous. So we ended up living in Germany for 3 years, 4 years, 3 years. And then we went back to Bulgaria because we couldn't stay there any longer. It's kind of hard to be in Germany if you're not there legally.
Mm.
And then we lived in Bulgaria for like 5 more years, and we won the diversification visa. That same one that Trump was trying to get rid of.
Oh.
We won that thing. People
Huh.
won it and they come here like that from that weird. It's supposed to be a raffle, but we don't think it's a raffle. We think they definitely pick and choose the people who get to finally come.
Okay.
And that's
like you'll be a good representation.
Yeah, so we ended up here in 1998, right before Y2K was going to destroy the world. Now, now it's something else destroying the world. Every few years, something is just destroying the world. Yeah. I think Godzilla is next.
Oh gosh, don't put that out there. Don't. I can't handle that.
10-foot lizard, not your jam?
Not my jam. Gosh, I've just been dealing with like the snakes out here. Like that's enough. Like I'm finally at this moment of like, all right, if I see another snake, I'll be okay. Like I've got my tongs to like grab it instead of kill it. Like I'm good. But like giant stuff in the no.
Are they venomous? Are they venomous ones?
Some of them, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, that would freak me out. I love snakes, but I don't want to deal with the venomous ones. I never want to be bitten by one. So
yeah, no.
Yeah, that's sketchy.
Super sketchy.
Yeah, that's how I ended up here. And I lived in Florida for 19 years. I moved to Colorado in 2017. Ironically, maybe, right? Like the same week that I moved. Like I moved to the United States on September like 22nd, I believe. And I want to say we left Florida like the same week, September like 20.
Oh wow.
It was weird. I don't know if it means anything. I don't think it does, but it's a cool coincidence.
Yeah.
So exactly 19 years I spent in Florida. Gave them 19 of my life. I love Colorado. It's much cuter than Florida, I think. I'm a little biased.
Much cuter?
That's what I think. You don't sweat as much.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I've thought, I definitely count you as mixed because, you know, the whole part of an idea of being mixed is that you come from two or more very different backgrounds, like upbringings. Yes. You have, I mean, clearly, whether you're talking Bulgaria or Germany, like that's very different than the United States for all kinds of reasons. And so like trying to assimilate into the United States, much less like Florida, which is about as US as you can get. It's so I was like, do you ever get to go back home, or how frequently do you get to go?
I don't know if I think this would add to the question a little bit, so I'm going to throw it in there. My parents are also two different nationalities. My dad is Bulgarian and my mom is Armenian. She was born in Bulgaria, but her father and mother are Armenian. So I'm technically half Armenian, which is, it doesn't really mean anything to me. I didn't learn Armenian. Unfortunately, it's a pretty difficult language. It's quite abstract compared to the other ones that I know. So I wasn't able to absorb it, but it's there. I'm 50% Armenian. And a little bit of that does seep into our culture. I mean, I lived with my grandmother and great-grandmother on my mother's side for the duration of time that we lived in Bulgaria. So like those first 3 years and then the 5 years between Germany and the United States. And I did get some of the cultural things from them. You know, my grandma taught me things. So I got a lot of that, like the cultural fears and the weird little superstitions that they had. I carried those with me for a while, but I'm happy to say that I've reasoned myself out of most of it by now. But that was part of it. It was a little bit weird growing up like that, because even though I got to learn a lot of different cool things, like it was confusing, you know, for a child. Like now you have to do things this way. Okay, now we're in the United States. You got to do them in a different way. People are different. Yeah. You know, it was very confusing growing up that way. But would I change it? I don't know. I learned a lot of cool things along the way. Like it was terrible and awful and I hated it many times, but like now I'm kind of like, would I trade that though? Like would I trade like the hardships for all of the cool memories that I have? I don't know. It's kind of tough.
Yeah. I mean, especially like on the surface, like just knowing different languages, kind of having an understanding of different cultures and what that, like just what it means to understand different cultures. Like you can do this here, you shouldn't do this here. There are consequences for these kinds of things. And then I'm sure like food,
Food is
But
different, yes. By the way, I recommend anyone if they have a chance to go to Bulgaria because maybe they're in a neighborhood or they have a lot of money on for flights and they want to do something bougie, like go to Bulgaria and eat the food. It's so good. The food there is so good and it's
all
so
right.
cheap. Like you will eat yourself twice as fat
What
with
is your
by
favorite
that.
dish?
The most expensive part is getting there because the flight's expensive, but once you get
Oh.
there, you can ball on a budget.
Okay.
It's so tasty. The food there is so good. Maybe I'm a little biased because I'm Bulgarian, but it's that like farm fresh, like home cooked. It's so good. It's a
Do
little
you
different from
do you have a favorite dish you can recommend?
here. Kufte is the staple. It's a meat thing, so most people will enjoy it. It's basically like ground beef and pork prepared in a certain way. It's like a meatloaf type deal.
Okay.
But kufte is what it's called, or kebabchi. Those are like our two staple meats dishes that everyone loves and enjoys.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
gotta try
If you want to be bougie, go to Bulgaria.
it. I hope you can go on me. I wish that for you.
Yeah. So here in the United States, do you ever find that your background is helpful to you
Good
or
question.
or profitable even?
I'm having trouble recall. I'm sure it has been at some point or another,
Yeah.
especially when I've met other people from uh, overseas. Like maybe I've met like some people who are from Russia, or not that Russia is very close to Bulgaria, but it's still closer than the United States as far as like how people behave and how they think.
Hmm.
So in situations like that where I've met other people who are from a Slavic background or maybe even other Bulgarians, like it's helped me understand their thinking better, whereas
Mm.
someone else may have not understood what they're saying or why they're saying the things that they're saying.
Mm.
But I don't know how valuable that is. It makes me angry more often than not.
Okay. Angry how?
I think sometimes I think of the way people think in other cultures, and I'm like, that's deeply flawed, and I hate it.
Oh, okay.
Because Bulgarians are like they want to be a modern country like every other place, and we do have all the modern conventions that every other country have, but the people there are still a little bit. There's a lot of misogyny still going around there. I'm just gonna
Mm.
I'm gonna stop tiptoeing around it. So
Gotcha.
I often understand where certain things are coming from, but it makes me upset because I'm like, well, that's wrong.
Mm.
Like I get it, but that's wrong.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
and like that, that's those are ways that it sort of helps me. And I'm sure there's others, but I can't think of them right now necessarily. I feel like more often than not it trips me up because there is a pretty big cultural difference, and
Mm.
you can come with a lot of weird cultural baggage from another place where it makes it difficult for you to understand why people are saying certain things to you, and maybe they're saying them in a friendly way, but you already have a different association with that concept, so it doesn't
Yeah.
sound as friendly to you.
Yeah.
It can make building relationships a little bit difficult if you're not careful to try and understand that this is a different person who grew up in a different place and those words mean a different thing to them.
Mm-hmm.
I've encountered that a lot. And it helps to understand, but it's also kind of like, yeah, it's a little bit taxing emotionally.
Yeah.
Can be.
I can think of the most clear example that I can think of is, so I was working with this helicopter tour company. We have a lot of tourists come through, and a huge amount, a lot of tourists from India, and so I learned a lot about Indian culture. I mean, it's still just like scratching the surface, of course. But one of the biggest things that was really hard for Americans to get used to is like how Indians like to agree with something. They, do this with their head, which is for American culture, like you do this when you're being silly, like if I'm mocking you or something. But for them, like they're
Oh,
giving
it's
an
like a head
affirmative.
bobble?
Yeah, like a head
Oh,
bob.
okay. I didn't know this.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'll be, giving some instructions, some very serious instructions, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah. And so, doofus Americans would be like, oh, these Indians doing this, like mocking them. And it's just like, no, like, let's just shift our brains to understand that this means something completely different. And like, even for me, like, to see it, it's like knee jerk my entire life. Like, that's just somebody like joking around or being childish, and it's not.
I mean, not
So
cool in that situation, but super cool conceptually.
yeah, yeah. And so
That's
I can
amazing.
only imagine.
I'm really glad you shared that with me because I actually realized something else. And I guess I tend to forget this because I have no reason to think of it. But I should mention that one of the biggest and weirdest differences between Bulgaria and here, and even Bulgaria and like other European countries, because I think only like one or two other countries do this, and I can't name which ones they are, but in Bulgaria, when you have the head gestures of like yes and no,
Mm-hmm.
those are flipped there. This
Oh God.
yes, and this is no.
Oh gosh, that's so confusing.
I don't know why, but we do it differently. I never really understood why, but we do it differently. And the last time I did visit, I had like a goofy moment like that where my grandma was like, would you like some soup? And I was like, yeah, I'd like some soup. And she was like, okay, I'll put it away. And I'm like, no, I want the soup. I want the soup. She's like, well, you shook your head no. And I'm like, no, I meant yes, yes. Like, well, but I haven't
Oh my
been there in
goodness.
like, let's see, 14 years.
Oh wow.
Like when this incident happened, I hadn't been there. Like this was my first visit in 14 years, so I was like, it
Oof.
going there. I knew it, but it's difficult to switch that off. I mean, that's such a basic motion. Like it's
Right.
burned into your mind now. So
Yeah.
like suddenly, even though you know that you're in a place now where it's flipped, like to try and on the fly remember that is like crazy. Especially because it's the same motion but the opposite one. I think it would have
Yeah.
been a little bit easier for me to remember if it was some completely different motion, but because
Yeah.
it's the same thing, I was just like, yeah, there was a couple of little hiccups like that where I was like, oh.
Gosh, yeah. So like really simple examples, but again, I can only imagine how frustrating that can get when you're trying to like speak of anything kind of more serious or like even apply that in a serious situation. It's just
Yeah,
like you are
like there's
actually
no
talking
room
about
for error
rewiring.
where you need
Yeah,
to have clear communication, and now you can't because there's like it needs to be translated. Like it's like
yeah,
you're listening to it, but you're having to translate what you're hearing into your own language so that you can understand it, and it's difficult. It's a
yeah.
difficult process. I don't know how I would explain it to someone who hasn't had to learn a second language.
You
And I'm
know,
not talking about high school like or college because you can get by without really like having to
right.
think about what the person is saying because it's an exercise and whatever, maybe you get a B on it. But like
Yeah.
when you're in another country and you need to ask that person where the fuck this building is and you need to do it quick and you
Yeah.
don't know the language very well and you're like trying to understand what they're saying to you, it's a little bit crazy. It's very hectic in the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. I trying not to like have judgment for people against people who refuse to like learn other languages, but like it's so good for the brain. Like it sucks. But
It's really good for the brain. It's good for the brain. I was reading something recently about how it like helps prevent cognitive decline to know a second
mm,
language because it basically like they were saying how people who know more than one language when they hear sounds because language is sounds when they hear sounds the brain has to now call back to two different sets of language pieces to figure out what they're saying. Like it they did some like scanning stuff that was very cool, which revealed
mm,
that actually the neurons fire in both languages, and the person in a split second has to decide are they speaking English or German or whatever other language they might know.
yeah. Huh. So
Kind
in layman's terms, that is your brain working harder. folks.
Language learning. I've had a lot of fun with Duolingo in the last year, and I
Ah,
anyone who wants to hone their language skills.
what?
I don't get anything for saying this. I just really like the app.
Yeah, no, I think it's really funny. Some of the translations or some of the like quizzes are weird. I don't know if
What
what
language
language were
did
you
you
working? Oh, I was doing French and Spanish.
learn?
Yeah,
Okay, so
Portuguese was a little
friend does
hard, but
French too, and the French one looked weird when I was looking at hers. It looked weird, the French one. But yeah, they have some oddball sentences in there, and I think it's just really good fun to like help you remember the stuff because you're more likely to
yeah,
remember some goofy thing than something really.
that is true. Very true.
They definitely do it on purpose. They give you some really funny exercises. My favorite one is my duck is bigger than his. That was one sentence that I had in German, and I was like, yes, my duck is bigger than his.
Please, please, please. If you find a situation in which you actually get to use that, please let me know. Just remember me. So getting into some good stuff. So just diving right into the philosophy. So of course, I come from like an academic philosophy background, but part of the reason that I have loved remaining connected with you is because you think. And so that's all that's really required for philosophy. So I just wonder, how does philosophy apply to your life? How do you think philosophy is relevant to your life personally or professionally?
Uh, well, first of all, I do a lot of extracurricular thinking. Um, I think personally, let me tackle these one by one. Personally, I would say it helps me because um, it helps me get out of sticky situations emotionally. Um, I found a lot of relief in just doing a little more creative thinking to kind of calm like any kind of anxieties and like things like that I think everyone gets. I hope so.
Yeah.
So personally, I feel like even though I've never taken a philosophy class or anything like that, I tend to enjoy like maybe some amateur philosophizing on my own to sort of make sense of the world, why things are happening, why people are doing the things that they're doing, even though I don't like them. Stuff like that, I think. It might be a little bit basic, but like I said, I don't have any academic background with philosophy, so I think any practice of it that I do is completely amateur.
Yeah.
But I think I think it does help. Like it's good to it's good to let yourself take a walk in that area, in that realm,
Yeah.
because you never know what you might discover or learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Professionally, it's sort of in the same realm, but it helps me to understand others more. And I sometimes I really don't want to understand others, but you have to because at the end of the day, I do entertainment and I'm interested in knowing what makes people feel good, what makes people feel safe and happy, um, while also sometimes feeling extremely unsafe at the same time. And that requires a lot of creative thinking as well, especially if you want to, keep things kind of interesting and come up with
Yeah.
new ideas all the time. It definitely boosts creativity professionally, for sure.
Yeah. So about this boosting kind of creativity and I mean, you deal with people's, exactly as you said, with what, brings people pleasure and discomfort. And you dance this like fine line between those things. There's just so much to say right now. So I feel like I actually should have started here. Like, as a dominant, as a dominatrix, just to be clear to the audience, because I had to make this clear when I was interviewing one of my pole friends. Yes, people are in handcuffs, people are in latex, people are restrained in very extreme ways. And you facilitate these things at their request being used loosely. And so when you're being creative in dancing that line, I mean, what kinds of like questions, what kind of brainstorming do you do as a dominant? I guess I'm asking. What does that look like for you? And how's that like different?
Vary a lot depending on how, how easy to work with the person is. And, there's a limit, of course. There's a very clear limit, in fact, of how difficult they can be before I just won't deal with it.
Okay.
But, it just depends because sometimes I have a lot more time to think and sometimes I have a lot less time to think. Like sometimes people book things last minute because I don't know, they just have to for some reason. And I never recommend that for anything at all because it doesn't give the person time to prepare. Like, it's not like you're booking, a car wash that like a machine can do. You're booking something very creative. So if you give the person like 15 minutes to think about it, I mean, sure, they might be experienced and have lots of things to pull from their little like toolbox. But at the same time, you want to give them more time. So like ideally, I think a couple of days I like to have to think about something that I'm gonna do that's very creative like that, like a scene, especially if it's something very involved. And it'll give you more opportunities to come up with different things to pull from. Because the other thing is, sometimes even if I did plan ahead, things go wrong and then you have to brainstorm quickly anyway. But it helps if I had time to think about it. If I was like, okay, if I'll do this, but if it doesn't work, I'll do that. And I sort of have like a little mental checklist of like, this is like my idea, and like these are the things that could go wrong, and then like these are the routes I would take. And I don't have like a flow chart or anything. It's just very nebulous. Like in my mind, I don't have like a timeline or anything. Because things could go wrong. I mean, maybe that day, like the person's, I don't know, having like a leg cramp and you can't like tie them a certain way or something. Like there's just like different things. Maybe like that day they woke up and emotionally they didn't feel so good. So like maybe that weird humiliation scene that you had planned isn't really the best choice.
Not gonna fly.
Something like that because emotionally they won't be able to handle it. So there's a lot of like little things that you have to sort of consider and keep in the back of your mind. It's difficult to automate something like that. But my creative process usually involves just kind of sitting down and thinking about, these are like the things that this person is interested in finding out about, and these are the things that they definitely can't do, and what can I, what are my options within that realm. And if I'll be honest, if the person makes a good impression, I think it definitely stimulates my my creativity a little bit more, because it frees up all of my concerns about whether or not they'll be difficult, and allows more space for me to think about all the possibilities that are there. So a lot of variability. I wish I could answer that a little bit more like concretely for you, but I think this is
I like that, and it's like I'm smiling, and it's really like warming my heart because of like I'm just understanding how this is really applicable to spaces outside of the BDSM world. It's like we don't know what mental space, what headspace somebody is going to be in whenever we are going to be encountering them, especially if it's something that we've made an appointment for, like whether we are actually talking about a car wash or we're talking about something less automated. Like, we don't know if the machine is going to be broken, whether that machine is like the one that we made the appointment for or ourselves. Like, but yeah, if we go for a car wash and it turns out somebody like broke our windshield that morning, like, our plans are ruined. And so we have to make other plans, and being able to think creatively when you have somebody's energy, in your hands, it is really important. And I think that's really beautiful as a thinker to hear that, like, you do consider these things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces. There's so many different pieces to creating this moment. And you don't know, I don't have control over every single one of them. I mean, I obviously I try to put myself in a position where I have the most control, because that's the whole point of the situation. But ultimately, I don't have 100% control, So you kind of have to, you have to be kind of on your toes, and be able to think quickly. And be able to read people really well. And sometimes you're reading someone you just met. You don't know this person. That's why I always tell people, that's another thing I say to people. I'm like, it really takes a couple of times. Like, I think we're all fed this, like, I mean, I think it's kind of a lie, like this sort of like fantasy of love at first sight, which doesn't have to be romantic love at first sight. You could fall in love with like an item at first sight, like you see something and you like suddenly love it and think that you need it in your life. But like, that's very rare. Yeah. Sometimes you don't see the amazing things inside of a person the first time you see them. Sometimes you need to see them 2 or 3 times to see how amazing they really are. So like, expecting to be able to meet someone and right away to have this like connection where you can go really far into like some sort of really dystopian scene with them is, I would keep my expectations low so that I can be surprised. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying this in a mean way, like you're gonna have a bad time. I'm just saying, like, usually it takes a couple of meetings to be able to even just relax enough to be able to allow the other person to read you better. Yeah. Sometimes the other person is so nervous that I'm having a hard time figuring out, are they having a good time or are they so terrified their heart's about to explode? And it takes 2, like, and I think a lot of times it does take a couple of tries to sort of like really get to where you're going, and then you can make your decision. I'm like, I like this, or no. It doesn't really lead into this, but it's still under the same category. Kind of a big question. What purpose or purposes do you feel you serve to individuals or to yourself or to society, like through your professionally? What purposes do you serve? Yeah. That's a big one. I have to talk about myself and how important I am. No. I think it's hard to touch on those subjects without feeling a little bit arrogant, but I'll do it. Even when you said earlier, like, we met because I was your boss, I was like, I never really, like, I mean, yes, I was, but I just never really like thought of it that way. Like, I just felt like we were all working there together, and I did the schedule and and told us what colors what was the color theme for the night? Yeah, well, I let people choose that a lot of times. So happy there. But let's see, my purpose. Well, first of all, I definitely feel like I give people a safe space to experience their fantasies. And I suppose I'm no more bound by any rules than anyone else, because there's no contract. There's no, like, when you go to the doctor and you're about to get a procedure done, they make you sign like 10 different papers saying that if something goes wrong, you're not going to sue the doctor and blah, 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 and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's no such thing when I interact with someone. There's no such thing. There's no contract. I mean, the contract can be there as part of some sort of role play or something, but it wouldn't really work in court. So technically, legally speaking, I guess I'm not bound by any obligation to keep the person safe. But I am professionally, because I've built my whole career around this. So like I can't let someone die.
Yeah.
Or I can't let them have such a terrible experience that they like run out and tell everyone that I'm like the worst person in the world, you know?
Yeah.
I have a moral obligation to keep people that I see safe, because that's what I represent. I represent a safe space for them to experience their kinks. I represent you know, like an iteration of their interests with my art and, you know, the stuff that I do that my followers like. So I think that's really important for the community. People are going to have these desires and these fantasies and these thoughts, and they're not innately bad as long as you exercise them in a safe way that's not affecting anyone around you in a bad way. Then it's that's your business, that's your thing. You do you. You know. So I think that giving people a place to explore their desires and explore their imaginations is important, because what I've learned in life is that if you tell someone no, they're just going to go do it somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like there's very few people who are deterred by a ban or by a censor on something. Most people are determined enough that if it's a desire of theirs, they're going to pursue it. And it's better to give them a safe place to pursue it versus banishing them into the shadows where they're going to accidentally suffocate themselves with a belt because they're stupid and they didn't realize that you shouldn't tie a knot around your neck when you're like doing whatever you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I feel like I facilitate a safe space for a lot of these people. I've met a lot of people with some really extreme interests, to the point where I'm like, I don't know what you do when I'm not around, but I worry for you. And I've had a lot of people. There's been people who have contacted me online, you know, and like told me about, asked me questions about their kinks and told me what they've done. And I've been like, please don't ever do that again, because we might never have a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, after one of your little play sessions, like, there's some extreme kinks out there, and I'm not saying people shouldn't do them, but I'm just saying people should be really careful when they do them, and, you know, make sure someone's around that knows what's going on, that like cares for you and understands what's happening.
Yeah.
Don't do things like secretively and on your own, because some of this stuff can be dangerous, and it's no more dangerous than, like, you know, maybe ice skating or something like that.
Right.
Like, you can get hurt doing anything, but if you think you're gonna get hurt doing something, make sure someone's around. You know, don't climb that sketchy ladder to the attic that might fall if you don't have someone nearby you. Don't choke yourself with a belt if there's someone not nearby you, to make sure that you don't die. You know, it's common sense stuff, but I feel like it's not always common sense stuff to people depending on the situation, and it's important for there to be people who can facilitate time. So people like me, I think, are important for the community, because they have a vested interest in educating people around them about the safety of the activities. They have a vested interest in making sure that these scenes go smoothly and no one gets hurt.
Yeah. I like that kind of phrasing of kind of couching all of this, because, you know, right now, and it's not really different than any other time, I think, in modern history, where people are trying to police like the sex industry, sex workers. And, you know, right now there's a lot going on with social media and considering like bans and like actual bans, shadow bans, taking posts down, deleting accounts. I know it's really touchy for you. It's like, but I think, you know, there's the prude. Yeah, there's the prude folks at one end who just want this to be completely eliminated from life, unless we're like talking about making a baby, I guess. Like that's the only safe time there is to talk about sex. And then there's everybody else who at least has some minimal understanding for, you know, their sexuality to be expressed in a whole lot of different ways. But there's this really small group there at the extreme prude end that are trying to kind of control all the different ways that sexuality can be expressed. And something that maybe people who aren't at that prude extreme, many people don't understand or don't reflect on very often is that whether we're talking about, you know, the pole dancing that I teach in a studio, or you with your clients, or even, you know, prostitutes who are in a state or in a brothel where it's legal, it's like we're trying to facilitate these experiences in a safe setting under certain, you know, with some education under our belt about how this should and shouldn't be done. And then, you know, you get to do this thing that you would otherwise hurt yourself or hurt someone else doing. And I think that's just really important to highlight. It's like, okay, if you don't personally like it, then don't do it. Don't invest in it. Don't go to your page. Don't like pick somebody up. Like, it's just not for you. Fine.
Don't look this way. Just look the other way.
Just look the other way. Yeah. But if people are trying to access these experiences in really safe ways and high quality ways, then I don't see a problem. But
yeah, I feel like underneath all of that is just these control freak people. You know, because what do you care what a bunch of other people are doing? Like, why does everyone have to do what you want to do? Who made you the moral compass of the world? Like, why can't you boil it down to, like, is this damaging anything? No? Okay, leave it alone then. It's not damaging anyone. It's not hurting anyone. It's not messing anything up. And honestly, the whole thing with, you know, oh well, we're just trying to make sure no one gets sex trafficked and stuff like that. Like, that whole thing, what I want to say about that is, I find the I find it so
just let it out.
I find it so insulting that this is what they choose. Like, I'm sorry, but I just a tiny little bit of thinking would lead you to see that that's, first of all, a blatant lie. Like, that's not why they're doing it. And second of all, like, there's a distinct difference between people who are being trafficked, which is a crime, and people who are doing a job.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I mean, you could kidnap people and make them dig ditches. So, like, is construction now a bad job because people are being trafficked in ditches?
Yeah.
This can be applied to so many different ways. I don't know what it's called. I think it's called, like, it's called the slippery slope. I think that's what it's called. And, like, you know, they try to use this other thing, like, oh, well, you know, if this lady is doing this, then, like, who knows? Next thing you know, like, my 1-year-old baby's gonna be sucking dicks for crack. And it's like, no, it doesn't. Like, there's
doesn't work that way.
Concept. What are you doing? The fact that anyone is even agreeing with that is just, like, mind-blowing to me. To have the arrogance to come out and say something that makes no sense like that, just to try to assert your desire for how you think that the world should be, is just like, that shouldn't be allowed. You shouldn't be able to just come out and be like, oh, well, the blah blah blah, which is, like, a total lie, but, like, I'm just gonna use it as a supporting statement because no one's gonna fact check me. Like,
right.
come on.
Yeah. No, I tell you, like, this
power and control, and I don't like it.
Yeah. That's, you know, part of the reason that I'm doing this series, part of the reason, like, where this fits into this greater, like, Make America Think Again project, is that there's people who definitely have that power control issues, those power and control issues, and then there's people who are just on autopilot and they don't realize how irrational they're being. And so, you know, I hope that I can do my part to to, like, water the plants of rationality or whatever that might be. But I just hope that, you know, seeing a pretty face to some rational thinking, adding it to that.
Know whose perspective is going to stick.
Yeah, for real. And the other thing that came in my mind is asking, what have you learned about people in your profession?
I don't know if what I've learned in my profession is exclusive to my profession.
Okay.
I've learned some things about people that are exclusive to my profession, like that some people have certain kinks that you would never think that they would have. And that's made me feel like, the average person is a lot kinkier than we realize. And no one should be ashamed of that. That should be fine. Like, that shouldn't be weird. Or I think a lot more people would be more comfortable with talking about it if they didn't fear some sort of repercussions or backlash. Which is ridiculous. Like, I guess someone might unfriend you for liking a crappy band, but like, you shouldn't be friends with people who like not be friends with you just because you like something. Like, that's like not liking someone because they eat pizza rolls. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
So, I have learned like how much more common certain kinks are, and they're pretty common. Like, especially things like foot fetish. Bondage is really, really common. And I guess I have also understood people a little bit more on like the level of, there's a lot of weird, like, minute things that are in the works behind our emotions and what we want and what we don't want. And man, there's a huge difference between people, like, when they're flooded with one kind of chemical in their brain and when they're not, when they have a different one swimming around in there. You can become a really different person. And that's almost a little bit scary, but it does go to show you that we're all capable of pretty much the same stuff. I mean, sure, we all have like things that we're better at and things that we're worse at. But by and large, most of us are capable of being certain ways under the right conditions. Like, if when people are in a state of fear, in a state of arousal, or anything like that, you're almost talking to a different person.
Yeah.
And that's kind of valuable to know, because in a regular interaction with someone, like, let's say they're your cubicle mate or someone, you might never really figure out why that person acts so weird sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like I've gained, I don't want to say like I know, but I feel like I've gained insight into a lot of people in that way, because I see their demeanor change when they experience some kind of like very emotionally triggering thing, like whether it be arousal or excitement or joy, or whatever the scene involves, extreme fear. People really like that feeling of helplessness. It helps them even out in a weird way.
I think that really like provokes an interesting thought experiment for anybody who's just like, what the hell? Where, like, think about it. How often, whoever is watching or listening, how often do you see people in a different emotional state? So not just happy, not surprised, not sad, and not, I'm not sure what the other emotional states are. those are the typical ones that you'd see somebody in an office, not bored, and not like engaged, like some more extreme emotional states. And like, how often do we witness that? And if you're in a job where like you're not like a first line worker, you probably don't see people who are, in shock often, who are angry, who are in extreme kinds of pain. If you're not, a sex worker, you don't see people aroused frequent, different people aroused. You don't see different types of arousal or fear, these things that you're talking about.
Suddenly that guy that everyone thinks is a super nice guy is kind of a pig. Or you know, or that guy
Yeah.
who like everyone thinks is like the scariest person in the world is in complete subspace, and like you could never convince anyone that knows them outside of that realm that they would even be capable of becoming such a small docile person. But
Right.
that's part of them. They just, you know, they just keep it in check until it's time to release that version of themselves and let them
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, like the subspace is something that you definitely don't, you'll probably never really experience. I can't think of, I don't want to say never because you never say never.
Right.
But I can't think of many other situations where you would find someone in subspace. And that's a very profound situation to be in, when
Yeah.
you're in charge of someone who is in subspace, because
Yeah.
you're very much like responsible for them at that moment. They can lose a sense of themselves. They can forget who they are. They're very dependent on you at that moment, depending on like how deep they allow themselves to go in.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I wanna um underline that they're allowing themselves to go into that space. I'm not forcing them into subspace. I'm just facilitating an environment where they feel comfortable enough to fall into subspace,
Yeah.
because it's different things trigger it for different people, and some people have an easier time going in and out of it. It's a lot like hypnosis in a way, but not
Mm-hmm.
exactly the same. It's
Yeah.
just like a different state of suggestibility that you could fall in. But one thing that I've noticed that is sort of across the board is that they need to feel safe.
Right.
They can't feel ultimately unsafe, even though it's a unsafe situation. They need to. There needs to be like a bottom line of safety. Like they know that like you are their dom and you are there, and you're gonna make sure they don't fall over in their
Yeah.
dizziness and like crack their
Yeah.
head open or something.
Yeah.
Which can happen. People can get a little dizzy. They might need to like lay down and just like fish out for a moment, absorb what's happening.
Fish out. I've not heard that. Like
I've
that.
seen all sorts of crazy reactions, and like they're all beautiful and unique, and they kind of make you feel really good inside because you're like, oh my god, this person's like jello now. Like I can do whatever I want to them. I won't be evil, but I can do whatever I want with them.
Yeah. So just for kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say that I'm the most experienced person. I'm so not experienced, but from my perspective, as somebody who has been, I spent a few years like getting tied up. I was dating somebody who did that, and it was lovely. I love rope play. It's
Oh yeah.
really freeing. And so for anybody who doesn't understand, like the subspace is, from my experiences, it's this place, physical, mental place, space that you can go to, that is peace and freedom. It's letting go. You do, God, now I'm trying to like say this, and it's so
Tough to
so
explain,
difficult
huh?
to explain. Yeah, my God. So okay, let me back myself up. Like make this relatable. Non-sexual. So in like child therapy, or childhood education, you talk about how children will push boundaries, how children or animals will try and test what they can do to their parents, to their whoever their caregiver is, to see where that boundary is, to see how far they can go. Okay. Essentially, if I'm with a Dom, that's what we're going to do. We're going to establish those boundaries written down verbally, some kind of way. And then anything before or within those boundaries is wide open. And that's where you get to experience all kinds of joy and pain and all those other emotions that we don't usually get to do on a daily basis. So subspace is just freaking like diving in and being like absorbing all that stuff and just being in those in that mental state. It's just like I don't have to think, I don't have to do, I don't have to be in control, be the not conscious, but I don't have to be in control of myself necessarily, because that boundary is being kept up by this person. They know what those things are, and they're going to keep me from going outside of those boundaries. Yeah. Just want to put that out there for some folks, if that was helpful at all. I'm not sure. But to hear you speak of it, you know, from your perspective is again, just so nice, because like, you know, yeah, it feels really good to be like, oh gosh, I'm floating, or like, I feel like the extra endorphins being released or whatever, but like to be able to see, to witness that in somebody else is just, oh, it seems so nice.
Yeah, it's very humbling every time, because I feel like um I don't know if I understand it exactly, because I definitely believe that everyone has their own unique experience and you can't understand someone exactly. But from my perspective, I'm just like, oh, they really like trust me.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel good, because I'm like, okay, like here I am, like giving this person this like amazing experience, and getting to kind of like live through their eyes, through it vicariously. And it's a good experience for me usually too, because I can kind of enjoy that from a safe distance.
Nice. Oh, I have to move on to my last big question. And this is on existential dilemmas. So, so basically, yeah, what are your thoughts on existential dilemmas? How do they apply to your life? How do you see them? How do you experience them?
Oh.
Yeah.
Existential dilemmas. Even just saying it is complicated.
Right? If it's helpful,
like
I can
float from one to another all the time.
Okay.
You know, like I just feel like I'm flowing through different ones
Okay.
all the time. What were you gonna say?
Oh, so the last conversation I was having was with a pole friend who she, when I met her, since I met her, she has gotten a boob job and she's had a child. And so when I asked her this question, I was like, you know, of course, there's all kinds of existential dilemmas, but like, as far as physically knowing you, it was pre-boob job, child. And those are three different bodies that like she has been living in. So like, as somebody who's never done any of those things, I cannot fathom like, oh, my body is now different. Like that's an existential thing for me. So I don't know like if that applies to you, because you're looking great. I'm so glad you're healthy and that everything turned out well with you and your ladies.
Well, I did get boobs, so I guess I could, but I didn't think that it didn't really make me feel too different.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't apply to you.
I don't think that applies there too much. I think more in terms of having to play all these different roles in my life. I feel like I've always struggled a little bit with like identity and what I'm supposed to be doing here. What's my purpose after all? Do I just get to live for, 70-ish consecutive years and then become Ash, or what? Or do I have like a greater purpose? Why did I have to learn all these things in my life? I don't know. I think I just deal with it all by learning as much as I can so that I could try to make sense of it all. Although I feel like that just makes me more confused at the end of the day. Trying to, go back and piece together like my past and my present and how different they are. And thinking back of like, living a life where you had to really plan ahead a lot because things weren't as readily available as they are here. And like, I didn't have to do any of that. I was just along for the ride because I was a child, but like, I thought that was going to be my life. And I was going to have to, make sure that I get things a certain time because I have to can my own things for the winter, like my grandma did. Yeah. But that being my life, I ended up switching directions completely and living here and doing this. I don't think I would have ever guessed that I would have been like a big scary dominatrix, or even like a friendly one sometimes. If you asked me when I was a kid, I think I wanted to be like a biologist or an animal doctor or something when I was a kid. I don't know. I don't even remember anymore. It's so long ago. I don't really know how to answer your question very well without rambling.
That's fine. I mean, and that's part of the existential dilemma, right? Like we think that we have one problem, and then we start thinking about the problem, and then that leads us to other problems, and then we don't really know where we started or where we're going or where we are. So
that's why I'm saying I feel like I just flow from one to another, because right when I feel like I figured it out, I'm like, oh, but then there was this other thing.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't make any sense now. But
yeah.
I think as long as you do your best every single day to be a nice person and to just mind your own business, your life will be okay. But I don't make any promises of that.
Like it. Because I wanted to ask you at the beginning if there were any like non-negotiables for you, because I was asking that of one of my other friends, and I think that sounds like one for you. Just kind of mind your own business.
Non-negotiables. Can you explain the question a little bit better?
Yeah. So at first glance, at first blush, people have their assumptions about what a dominatrix is and who she what a dominant is, what kind of personality that person has, and so as you being a full person who is no different than any other person in many ways, what are some things that people need to know flat out about you, just non-negotiables, about your personality, or
there's no budging.
Yeah.
Let's see. As a dominatrix, well, first of all, I don't switch. A lot of people like to ask. You're not going to be that special snowflake. It's not happening. Don't ask. It just makes you look kind of rude, honestly. And let's see, what else? I'm not, I'm just like a regular person, like all the other regular people. I have hobbies. I like to pet my cats. Like, when I have a scene that I'm doing, I'm focused on that, and that's who I am. But there's many facets of my personality, and I'm not. I definitely facilitate a fantasy for people. I don't wake up in my thigh-high boots and my perfectly shined cat suit. I wish I did, but I don't.
Really? You don't wake up in your thigh-high boots?
God. And what else? I'm just not a very judgmental person, so I don't have a lot of things. I just expect everyone to respect me, so that I can respect them. And I mean, I feel like it's really as basic as that. When it's time for me to be the dominatrix, I have rules that are very clearly written for everyone to read, that you can follow in order to communicate with me or to meet with me. But outside of that like fantasy realm where you need to follow those like 10 commandments that I have for people, I feel like respect is the most important thing that you can give people. You don't even have to give them kindness if you don't want to. Maybe you don't have any kindness left, but you have to respect other people, because if you don't respect other people, they won't respect you. And one of my non-negotiables is definitely like, if I find that someone is disrespectful in any way, even if it's just by accident, because I definitely believe that a deed is a deed, whether it was accidental or not. So there's only so many times people can forgive you. And I can't forgive a lot of disrespect. I think that's one of the most important things. respect others, respect their right to disagree with you, and respect their rights to have different likes and dislikes from you, and then move on. And that's it.
Nice. I like it. I have one just final question. It's a quick one. And this one comes from my boyfriend. He wants to know what your favorite or your dream cosplay is.
My dream one?
Your dream cosplay?
Cosplay?
Yeah. Or your favorite one that you've done.
My favorite one that I've done is probably the Aeon Flux one.
I don't think I've seen that.
Aeon Flux, or I love my Princess Peach. I mean, a lot of people are like, you're not, Princess Peach is not a dominatrix. I'm like, how do you know she wasn't whooping Bowser's ass in the castle? You don't know that. Maybe she didn't want to hang out with Mario. Maybe she was fucking, maybe she liked, I don't know. I love being like Peach because I'm a big sucker for Super Mario, so my rubber Peach is up there. But I think just on top of that is my Aeon Flux because she was really hot, and I'm probably gonna do her again soon after, because I did her before I did the boobs, so I have to do it now again with the boobs.
Okay. I'm gonna go scrolling through to find that one.
Okay. Cool. My good friend Alice shot it for me. Nice. She did a good job.
Is there anything else that you would like the world to know that you'd like to share in this context?
I want the world to know that kink is good, and being horny is good, and being sexually liberal is good, and I don't think you should be ashamed of any of your desires. And if you're ever questioning whether or not something you're doing is bad, just ask yourself this question: am I hurting anyone? And if you're not sure whether you're hurting someone or not, then ask them. Be like, hey, does this bother you? And if they say no, then you're not hurting anyone, so you're free to enjoy yourself as much as you want, and don't let anyone bully you into thinking otherwise, because that's not nice. And also, I want people to know that I am a Denver resident, so if they want to meet me for anything, they'd have to come here, or they'd have to wait until I travel to a place that they live in, which can all be found on my website, denvermistress.com. So don't DM me questions. I hate that. Just go on there and look. It's all in there. I did it all myself. I spent a lot of time and effort so that it can be beautiful for everyone who wants to come and look. And I want you to enjoy this thing that I worked on very hard for all of you. So go to my website and look at all the things, and then ask me questions.
Denvermistress.com.
Yes, denvermistress.com. It's so simple. Or Miss Isobel Devi on social media. So
awesome. Yeah. Thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah, I've learned some things about you, and I've learned some things, and I've got stuff to chew on for the rest of today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I was really looking forward to doing this with you. When you asked me, I was very excited and honored, because I love all of your projects. You always do cool things that are thought-provoking, and I like thinking. So, I mean, I do it whether I like it or not, but I enjoy it. This was wonderful. This was a great exercise for me. And if you have any questions later on, you're obviously more than welcome.